right, we're recording. So
Got it.
welcome everyone to our workshop on birth order, and just wanted to say I'm excited that you guys are here. When Kelly and I had talked about this topic and he has spoken on this before, it was just such an engaging conversation about birth order and how it affects not only parenting, marriage, but also in your workplace or anywhere you go. And so Kelly jumped onto our advisory board this year for Journey South Bay Children's Ministry, and he's had a wealth of experience of decades of blessing young families in marriage and parenting classes. He ran the Awanas program and training other trainers that teach Awanas, and it is no coincidence that God is blessing him to be a part of our church and helping us to grow as parents and to help us grow as grandparents. So anyhow, with that, I'm excited to hear what Kelly's going to be sharing with us. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Kelly.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having us as Journey South Bay and having me into your living room. And as we get started, hey, can I go ahead and pray for us? Get us quickly opened, and then we'll have a quick conversation for the next hour or so about birth order and a little bit of that. So if you'd link your hearts with mine for a moment. Our great God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for the time that you give to us, just the beautiful sunshine outside, the children that get to run around our feet throughout the day and the week. Father, I ask that as we spend some time speaking on this topic, that you'll open our hearts to what you need us to hear and equip us with something new that we can use in the way that we relate with others. Father, I ask that the time that we invest here will be honoring to you. And in addition to that, allow us to grow in a spiritual way that we even come closer to who your son, conforming to the image of who your son is. And we pray these things through his name and in his name. Amen. So good morning. Thank you again for having me in. Bear with me for a second. So today, hold on. There we go. Let's see if we can do it. We're going to be talking about birth order. Love the background because now it doesn't like to take the book because it's all white. So a couple things about birth order. In fact, let me do this. I like to share my screen, and we're going to kind of flip through a couple topics here this morning. By the way, we are not muting everybody. We want you, if you've got a question through the midst of this, would like you to be able to jump right in and be able to, let's see, you're still on me, aren't we? Are you seeing the birth order screen? Yes, okay, I got that. Okay, so we haven't muted you, but we want to make sure that if you've got a question, feel free to jump into any place within our conversation today, because we want to help make this valuable to you. So we're talking about birth order. I'm using the book. I'm using the content from the book, the Birth Order book by Kevin Lehman, a Christian psychologist. He's actually located out of the Scottsdale, Arizona area. He's written several books. Little bit about me, a little bit further about me. I've got 2 grown children and have 2 grandchildren. This book really helped me out because this is kind of going to be my first question as we go along here. Bear with me a second. I want to get another screen up. I'm able, no, not that one. There we go. So this helped me out because as a middle child, I had a quick question about raising a firstborn. So there's my first question for each one of you. Where do you sit in the pecking order? Are you a firstborn? Are you the middle? Or are you the baby? And maybe a quick question. We all know that with kids, we know that where they lie. Where does your spouse lie in that? As we spend a little time this morning, I want you to also discover a little bit something about your spouse, I trust, and what makes them who they are. As we see, sorry about that, we've all been placed in our family. We did not choose the family we were born into. We don't choose who our siblings are going to be, nor where we would fall in the family lineage, but God did. Let me read for you from Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thoughts from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are intimately acquainted with my ways. Even before there was a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you knew it all. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written, the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. How precious also are your thoughts of me, O God. How vast the sum of them. Psalm 139. So let me ask a couple quick questions. This is going to be a place that you guys can unmute. I want to have a question, and I'm going to ask you, where do you think this person is in birth order? We talked about firstborns, middle, and babies. So here's the first question. He works hard at every assignment or task. He spends hours practicing the drills to be as good as his siblings. He wants to show them he can compete at their level. Where does this person sit in birth order? Jump in.
Is the youngest one?
Ooh, a baby. Good thought.
The middle.
Could be a middle. Yes. Both of those are valid. Works hard at every assignment. Likely a middle child on this one. We'll talk about why middle versus the baby. So, all right. Ready for the next one? Molly never fit in. Although she had siblings, she never really felt a part of the family. She was tall and thin with black eyes, while the rest of her families were stocky and athletic with blue eyes. Great question here. Thoughts?
Maybe
Okay,
the
could it be? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying the middle child. Sounds like that.
I like a middle. Anybody else? Another thought? Could be middle. Could also be an adoptive child brought into the family. So, ooh, wait, you didn't give us that answer, Kelly. How about the next one? William always had an audience to play to. He could draw a crowd at the game, the store, even the sidewalk outside of school. Where does William fall?
That sounds like the last born.
That sounds young.
It's the baby. Good, good, good. You guys getting the hang of this one. All right. Hey, Ashley seemed mature for her age. Even when she was little, she carried on conversations with people twice her age and well-educated. Ashley will certainly be somebody one day. What do you think?
Oldest.
Oldest.
Oldest, good. How about an only child?
I was gonna say that only child because they're usually only with adults, and so they're used to being in adult conversations.
Correct. Good, good, good. You guys are like right on track here. So awesome. Here's our last question for this fun session. Frank was good looking, president of the debate team and captain of the basketball squad. Frank was recently listed in the who's who of the South Bay. Where does he fall?
Oldest.
Eldest, firstborn. Good, 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 good. All right. I'm scrolling through a couple of my screens here. All right. Where am I? And click. All right. So today we're going to take a look primarily at three specific areas. We talked about the firstborn, we talked about the middle, and we talked about the baby based on the couple snippets that we had put up there. So couple things I want to kind of do for clarifications for conversation today that will hopefully help us here. Factors that make you you. For a young child growing up, there's no greater influence in his or her family. The most intimate relationships you'll ever have in life are with your family. And the relationships between parents and children is fluid, dynamic, and all important. All right, come on. Bear with me for a second. There it is. Sometimes there are extreme circumstances that tweak the natural birth order sequence that we just finished looking at. The result is that the latter born child may act like a firstborn, or a firstborn can sometimes have characteristics that are inconsistent with the way that firstborns are supposed to act. All birth orders have certain tendencies and general characteristics, but the real key is that there are dynamic, fluid relationships existing between members of the family. Firstborn personalities can also be created by the oldest of your sex having a 5-year gap between children, or achieving a role reversal and taking over the firstborn privilege and responsibility. We're going to spend some time talking and fleshing some of that out. In chapter 2 of Dr. Lehman's book, he does a better job of, Dr. Lehman reminds us in chapter 2 that to do a better job of understanding the signposts, that a few psychological terms used in his writings can help understand what we are considering as we speak. One of the items that he speaks about is called the family constellation, or the family zoo. Some of you grew up in the family zoo. These are the variables that different factors or forces have that impact each one of us, no matter what his or her birth order includes. So as we looked at here, we talked about spacing, sex of the child, physical, mental, and emotional differences, a sibling's death or adoption, birth order position of the parents. This is why this is important to us. Relationships between the parents. And then a couple other things for us to think about. The critical eye of a parent and the blending of families. So just a couple things for us to consider. So as we take a look, I want to jump into each of those birth orders, and we'll look at the next several slides as we come through. The hope here is as we do some observations about firstborns, this is not a list that says, hey, check them off and then you'll know that that's who you are. And if you don't check it off, then that's not you. This is a large bucket that we're drawing from. So think about firstborns. You guys probably all, when you think about a firstborn, if this is you, these words will resonate. Some of these words will resonate with you. Like a perfectionist, reliable, conscientious, a list maker. That's my wife. Well organized, hard driving, a natural leader, critical, serious, logical. They don't like surprises. And today, love computers. So, firstborns tend to be compliant and caregivers. They make good students. They're good workers. They're approval seekers from their teachers, their coaches, even from their bosses. Firstborns tend to be movers and shakers as well. Firstborns are assertive, strong-willed, high achievers, high drivers. They tend to use words and tend to be exacting, precise, picky. Hey, if you aren't one of these, you have to deal with one. Every one of us deals with a firstborn, whether it's in business, at the kids' soccer game, social events, even at church. How many of you guys are firstborn?
I am.
I'm too.
Did that resonate with you?
100%. Especially loving computers. That's weird.
So cool. Well, thinking about that as your child, for your own kids, Think about that for nephews or nieces. For those of us that have been already blessed with grandchildren, start watching them as well. All right, so here's the next one. Middle child. When the second child is born, rivalry often begins. And unfortunately, as most of us all know, it never comes to an end. And when the next child arrives, so do the fireworks. And there become more players in the family and the dynamics that happen there. A middle child is defined as the person born somewhere between the first or the oldest of the family and the last, literally the baby of the family. We'll talk about that in a few slides. Middle children are often good mediators. Relationships are important. Willing to take risks and strike out on their own. Middle children can be trusted with sensitive information. Each of us know a middle child. They have the ability to see things from both sides. They tend to be realistic and oftentimes step in as a peacemaker. Middle children feel they were born too late to get the privileges and special treatments of that firstborn, who seems to inherit the rights, and they were born too soon to strike the bonanza that many lastborns enjoy, such as having parents lighten up on discipline and freedoms. So the middle child, to the middleborns, they tend to descriptions, tend to be mediators, compromising, diplomatic, avoid conflict, independent, loyal to their peers, many friends, a maverick, secretive, unspoiled. The second child tends to shoot off in their own directions to create his or her path. He or she could live an inconsistent paradox, be a mystery. Middle children sometimes are described as iffy. The lifestyle is determined by its perception of the older child. As a mediator, diplomacy between his other siblings, not getting everything they think they deserve or getting more than they deserve. Peacemakers, they sometimes tend to be the peacemaker of the family because what they're ultimately looking for is to avoid any kind of conflict or confrontation. Middle children choose other ways to meet their needs for obtaining recognition. They avoid pain and getting even. They may even prefer to be the mediator, or they might come in and be a manipulator. Middle children learn to negotiate and compromise. These life skills benefit the middle child later in life. How many of you guys are middle children? Besides me. I guess that's me. You guys have to deal with me as the mediator then. All right. Here's our next one. How about the lastborn? What do we know? Lastborns typically are entertaining for the rest of us. Lastborns tend to be impetuous and brash. They vow to get attention and they make a mark and worry about the repercussions later in life, whenever that happens to be. An hour, a day. Lastborns are persistent. Lastborns are also warm, caring, and giving. They're charming and attention-seeking, likable, fun to be around, and entertaining. Lastborns are people-oriented, working well one-on-one or in small groups. Social settings and events are their cup of tea. And the baby is tenacious. He or she is persistent, and they will not take no for an answer. They will likely be affectionate and engaging. They're caring, loving, wanting to help, likes to get and give strokes. When you think about the lastborn, characteristics on the screen, manipulative, charming, tend to blame others though. They are attention seekers, tenacious until they get what they want, right? They're people person, a natural salesperson. They're precarious, definitely engaging, affectionate, and best of all, they love surprises. But wait, there are some variables that affect each of our constellations that I shared earlier. These factors or forces can impact on each person in the family, no matter where their birth order is. So we talked a little bit about spacing, the number of years between your children, the sex, in what sequence they were born. You could be a second born child, but if you have a boy and a girl and the boy is born second, he may still exemplify firstborn characteristics. Physical and mental emotional differences. Yep, our genes are important. Two girls, pretty, and one's pretty, the other's plain. You could have little Chester versus big little brother who's burly, right? Sad to think about it, but this does happen. How about siblings' death? When this occurs, causes the child below to get bumped up to the next birth order level. We shared briefly about adoptions, which may or may not have an effect on the birth order, depending on how old the child is when they get adopted. I bring this in because we all run into families that today with adoptions, with people bringing in siblings, bringing in nieces and nephews and things like that. It's going to adjust birth order within the dynamics of the family constellation or the family zoo in that household that we get to interact with. So, in birth order positions of each of the parents. So like a firstborn parent usually runs a much different shop than that if they were the baby. Back about who's the dominant one in the household. And the relationship between the parents. What is their parenting style? And how do they use that when they pass values on to their children? The critical eye parent tends to constantly criticize, and as a result, the children take a toll. And then there's the blending of families due to death or divorce. In a step family, certain birth orders can get stepped on. All right. So here's a quick thought. I talked about only children for a minute. A reminder that sorry about that. That was pretty quick. On an only child, okay, they never have to compete with other siblings for parents' attention or favor or resources. The good news is that the only child is more confident, articulate, and always seemingly on top of the things that they are. The bad news is they've never had to deal with the siblings or having to wait to get seconds. Characteristics of a single or an only child. Dr. Lehman describes it that they become a little adult by the age of 7. They're very thorough, deliberate. They tend to be high achievers. They're self-motivated, fearful, cautious, a voracious reader. They're black and white thinkers. They use words like very, extremely, exactly a lot. They can't bear to fail. Has very high expectations for themselves, more confident with people who are older or younger. The only child can really find themselves being a classic, discouraged perfectionist. As a parent, if you've only got one child, take note to that. Dr. Lehman talks about this pages 130 to about 132. If you've got the book or if you get the book, just make note of that. Might like to read some of his comments and what we as parents have the ability to do. So, all right. How you guys doing?
Good. Doing good.
Good.
All right.
Yeah,
Are you finding a nugget or two to chew on?
Yeah,
I am for sure. Yeah.
Great. I'm drinking coffee. Ask the question, that way I can take a break. All right. All right. The big questions for onlys, they want to answer. The only question that onlys want to have an answer for is, why is he or she an only? Why do we only have one? Okay, I'm going to move on from that before I get into trouble here. I know some of my audience here today. Hey, so the second born child, let's think about them for a second. They tend to develop their own style. They're always trying harder because they're trying to keep up with their firstborn, their older sibling. But they tend to also branch off in other directions. It doesn't take long for that firstborn to realize that once the secondborn has come into the household from the hospital, it's not a temporary thing, and they're going to stay. As discussed in previous sections, it is exciting. It's an exciting strategy to get the firstborn involved in the care of the new baby. With that said, remember that the firstborn has been dethroned and no longer will be the sole ruler of his household. There's company that's arrived that isn't leaving. When we look at the middles, we discuss these, we want to take a look at that. So thinking about when the second-born child, if you have two, remember what the firstborn did. They certainly loved on it, but at the same point, they lost half of mom and dad's attention because now mom and dad have to share their. Let me give a thought here. I know that our family makeups are different. So when we start thinking about multiple children, what happens when you got two boys? Luck. Rivalry is most intensive when you've got two boys. They learn how to react with their peers of their own sex. The problem is they lack some preparation to interact with the opposite sex. So mom, you play a significant role in the development of their understanding of womanhood and their success or failure in treating and caring for a future wife. Now, I know most of you guys are saying, Kelly, slow down here, buddy. Slow down, my friend. We're not ready to have them even have girlfriends, let alone. But I want you guys to be thinking, as parents, what do we need to know? How do we need to do that? As grandparents, remember, this is where we get to step in alongside our children in raising the grandchildren and helping them have some of those fun experiences. All right. Scroll down. I've got a couple more notes here. Hey, talking about fireworks, it's critical that mothers use reality discipline, firm and consistently. She should never take any garbage from them. She should never get into a power struggle or put herself in a position where the boys can walk on her or be disrespectful of her. Why? Because she's not only representing parenthood and motherhood, but she's also representing all of the womanhood to her two sons. If they learn to walk on her, they'll learn to walk on their wives later. Typically, the older brother is going to be identified very much with the establishment, with mom and dad. And he's going to be the standard bearer, the one who picks up on the family values and practices practices with them faithfully. He will probably be the leader and also the family sheriff or policeman. As far as keeping the younger brother in line, older brother often finds himself being the protector of the baby as well. Older brothers usually get a kick out of having younger brothers follow him. And this is a very basic way. The older brother learns a lot about practicing his leadership skills. This is a very basic reason you find more firstborns in leadership positions in life. At the other end of the family, the younger brother is eyeing older brother and deciding which way he will go. Another key principle that seems to apply in most cases is this: the second-born child will be the opposite of the firstborn, particularly if they are less than 5 years apart and the same sex. Rivalry are most likely to be heated if the boys are close in age. Put the boys 11 months apart, mom and dad, you really have your hands full. Sorry, we should have shared this with you before having kids. When two brothers are born close together, there are less chance for the older brothers to establish a clear superiority. This can be particularly true when physical size comes into play. Younger brother can pull a complete role reversal on the older brother due to the sheer height and weight advantage. So again, if you've got two boys and they're close in age, and the younger one's a little more burly, more athletic, he may be able to overpower his younger brother. Hey, let's talk about girls. Some of this stuff may resonate with you and your sisters or you and your brothers as you guys grew up. Thinking about girls, the father is the key figure here. Give each girl as much one-on-one time as possible. Allow each one to develop and mature at their own pace. Dads establish a benchmark for which daughters will evaluate and select qualities in their husband. Just as in boys, two girl families can have the same sex rivalries. The difference is they typically not as intense. One-on-one time is critical for each girl. It builds her self-esteem and a sense of her self-worth. But caution, watch out for the older one who may stretch rules to maintain her superiority position. Watch out for the younger one who might sit out and pout in order to get the attention. And call out the older one who is cheating. Take note, each will mature at their own speed and time. Don't force one to grow up too soon. And don't stymie the other's ability to grow into the woman she'll ultimately become, because your girl just isn't old enough yet. The older one will certainly take on more of a motherly role, caring for the younger household responsibility should be allocated subject to each child's ability, their interests, and their proficiencies. How about some thoughts if you've got a boy and a girl? Good news. Competition between older and younger is not that strong. The firstborn boy and the secondborn girl can often develop a closely emotional bond. Little sisters usually grow up to be super feminine. Older boys with younger sisters. Let's see, I already said that. All right. The older brother will be the protector of his younger sister. And the younger sister, if she becomes too helpless and dependent, she could ultimately become helpless and dependent upon men. When this type of woman gets married, she often winds up disillusioned and with an excellent candidate for the classic 7-year marriage. Discipline is separate. So that the other participant, discipline. When we talk about discipline needs to be done separately and unique based on who they are. This is where your second parent would come in. What we don't want to do is to have the older sibling discipline the younger or become the third parent in the wheel. So that's the thought on the boy and then a girl. How about the reverse? How about a girl and a boy? When the sister is older, often the little boy has a second mother. Typical scenario, the older sister and younger brother go their own directions. Both take on firstborn traits as the firstborn girl and the firstborn boy. If mom is the dominant one in the family, the second-born boy can feel insecure. The sister may respond by adding on to mother's comments and include simple words like, "You're so immature." If dad is a quiet pacifist, then the firstborn girl can also step in or on the younger and overpower. In some cases, the second-born child might simply escape and literally run away or flee at his earliest convenience. It's important that just like boy-girl birth order, that both children are given and feel that they are special. The second-born boy should be encouraged to develop into a man of God, into the man of God as ordained to him for him to become. It may be that a baby or that the firstborn male. Do we help him? Do we let him reside as a baby, or do we help him to become really the firstborn male, even though he was the second? Don't allow another family member to dictate who another child will be, either through bullying or dominating their sibling because they feel threatened by the sibling. A ladder rung below them in the birth order sequence is something that we need to be sensitive of as parents. Our hope is to help our children grow and mature into fully functioning adults and to live out life in their fullest ability. So here's some quick advice. Dr. Lehman. Always praise your children in public, chastise them in private. The basic parenting principle, accept their differences. Never use a label such as identifying them as either good or bad. Accepting your differences, no matter how many children there are in the family. Give your children unqualified love that is not determined by what they've done or how they perform or anything else. You know, God has loved us unconditionally, whether we sin or not. And we need to be loving our children, not praise them because they got an A, but because they did their best ability. Yes, we know that they could have done better, but we need to make sure that we still love them regardless of how they perform. Remember to love each child, but not relate to each child's differently, aware of them. So don't criticize a child unbeknownst to them by saying, hey, you know, I wish you were as good at soccer as Billy was. I wish you were a better artist as your sister Sally. Some thoughts on second family. I don't know that we have a whole lot of them. As we go through, there's so the second family comes into play when there is a 7-year gap between siblings. When there's enough spread between your last born and the one that's created, the next one that's born, you end up with a functional firstborn again. So don't sell short the powerful imprint that may end up having on them. Grant your lastborn, even granted your lastborn isn't truly a firstborn, he or she may carry some of those burdens and opportunities. So in this case, again, if you had a child, I'm thinking about a family that we knew, they had a 14-year-old and then they decided that they were having another child, and that little baby came along and then grew up. Even though they were a baby, they were also demonstrated firstborn characteristics. This is where that second family concept comes in that Dr. Lehman talked about. Some thoughts on blended families? Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. Thoughts on multiple births. I got ahead of myself here. So, what do we know? Twins are usually very aware of who the firstborn is, right? One of them will let you know, hey, I'm older, even if it was only by 1 or 2 minutes. There's a complicated relationship between multiples. Doesn't matter whether they're firstborn twins or they're somewhere in the middle. It's kind of fun. They usually are always going to be competitors and yet at the same point companions. There's a unique relationship that sits there. But the roles of the firstborn is always going to tend to be assertive leader, and the second will follow close behind. So common leadership traits here, they're going to resemble the firstborn. They'll be aggressive, loud, outspoken, opinionated, and intolerant. Where the latter, the minute or two behind, whatever that was, common follower traits resemble the shy middle child, loner, quiet, sometimes blends into the background, and undefiant. How many of us deal with folks that have blended families, like the Brady Bunch, or 8 is enough? People in step families seldom just blend. What they tend to do is they tend to collide. Blended families do not create new birth order positions, often even at a very young age, because firstborn suddenly has a stepbrother or stepsister who's older doesn't mean that the firstborn becomes a middle child or changes who they are based on the new structure of the family. Dr. Lehman writes in his book, Living in a Step Family Without Getting Stepped On. So when the key to the blended birth order game is this: when a child who is born into one birth order lands on another's limb in his blended family tree, do not treat that child as something he is not. He may have to take a different responsibility. He may play different roles at times, but never push or force him, or never forget who he really is within the family. Dr. Lehman's observation is that by the age of 4, an adopted child has operated at a certain birth order level. And whatever the family he was a part of before the adoption is where he's going to lie. Just because he winds up to be the oldest or the youngest in the new family doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a firstborn or the lastborn. All right. So let me do this just for a second. How's everybody doing? Guys doing okay?
Good.
Good. Are you getting enough stuff?
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Okay. So we're about halfway through the PowerPoint slides. I'm gonna pop up some tips and stuff for some more note taking through. So I'm hoping that the concepts that we've given help you think about who your kids are, think about who you are. How about your spouse? Have you you guys are sitting here chatting watching this? Are you guys poking each other as a couple saying, hey, that's you? This is one of those, get a babysitter and go out and talk about the stuff on a date. The restaurants have opened back up. This would be a fun thing to kind of talk about. You really criticize them. No. Make the observation. Say, hey, you really are this way. And that's what I love about you. It drives me crazy, but at the same point, that's what drew me. That's what caused me to draw into you within our relationship as couples. So the next several slides I'm going to run through, I'm going to tell you that I've got a couple fun racy slides upcoming. So I want to prepare you for that. So when you get there, go. Here we go. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about some parenting tips for each one of those groups. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. So, like I said, if you've got a question or something, feel free to just open up and stop, and let's continue the conversation. So, all right. Back to screen one. And bear with me as I get my screens repositioned here. So, all right. I'm looking ahead, seeing if I got any notes. So there we go. All right. So how about some tips for firstborns? All right. When you discipline your firstborn, don't reinforce his perfectionism by shouldering him. What I really mean is don't be an improver on what your child does. Accept it for who he is. Firstborns also need to know what the rules are. They need to be recognized for their place in the family. They should get some special privileges to go along with those additional responsibilities that you give to them. And as parents, take 2-on-1 time, both parents with the child alone. Firstborns respond better in adult company, remember, rather than any other birth order. And don't be too quick to jump in with corrections. Firstborns are very sensitive to being corrected. Give them time to figure it out. Let them, like in reading or sounding out words for some of the younger kids. If you're working on a project, don't solve their problem for them too quickly, particularly you firstborns. Stepping in on your firstborn. Allow them to struggle a little bit to figure out how to get it done. So how about the middle child? What are some things that we can do for this? Recognize the middle child tends to avoid sharing how they really feel about things. So set aside time for this child, because he will be least likely to insist on his fair share of time. As parents, make sure that we give it to them for what they need. Try to put your middle child, try to make your middle child feel special. Let them choose first sometimes, rather than always deferring to the firstborn. Set up some type of regular privilege that he can count on. Again, time on the computer. Saturday mornings at 9, he gets to pick the TV show or the games. He gets to figure out where we go out to dinner, where we go to lunch after church on Sundays. Buy them their own new toys and clothes. Hand-me-downs are fine, but once in a while, it's good to have something that's your own, that's new. Listen carefully to explanations. Their desire to avoid conflict may get in the way of what the real story is. Make sure that the family album has lots of photos of the middle child. Also, make sure that you take some of them alone. All right. Oops, sorry. I think there was one more that was supposed to pop up. There we go. Hey, quick question. Got a quick question for everybody. Coming back here. When you think about your photo albums, how many of you guys have photo albums? Even posting, okay? Question is, thinking about your own childhood and growing up, when you look back through the family albums that mom and dad put together, how many pictures were there of you, and how many of them were of your siblings and you? So here's the second one. I'm a middle child. My wife and I, we spent some fun time. We did that photo album of our firstborn baby girl, and it was wonderful. And that was all caught up until the secondborn came along 3 years later. Well, that first year, we were still pretty persistent in getting some pictures in. And then we started the secondborn photo album. Well, at 14, we went back and there were only just the pictures of her birth of the secondborn. She didn't have a photo album. She had a photo album. It was empty and a few pictures laying loose waiting to get put into that. So back to making that secondborn. Remember, I'm the secondborn here. I'm the middle. Thinking about ways to help make them feel special. Hey, Sue, as a grandma, talking to you, to me, guess what? We can maybe step in with our kids and say, hey, I want to spend the time with the child that may not get the same recognition. We might be able to lean in and do some more things to help make those the latter children feel more special. So there's some opportunities for us to come alongside our adult children with kids and help them make their kids feel really special. Where they find home in our household. As parents, how do you engage your parents with the kids? Recognizing that we are pulled in so many different directions. So just a couple thoughts for you. All right. Share. Back in. All right. How about the babies? All right. Make sure your lastborns have their fair share of responsibilities around the house. Don't let them get away with murder. In regards to any of the family rules and regulations, the rules should be the rules. Don't coddle your youngest. Oh, wait, hang on. Did I get that over? Yeah. All right. Don't coddle your youngest. Introduce your youngest to reading very early. At 6 months, it's not too late to start reading brightly colored illustration books. When your child starts reading, don't do the work for him. Lastborns tend to like to be read to, and thus tend to be the poorest readers in the family and school. When necessary, call the baby bluff. Poor grades means we don't get to go to Disneyland. I think they're opening back up, aren't they? Oops. And try to get your lastborn book completed before they're 21. Other things go other things, though, if necessary, if you don't have time for that. Back to that picture book that I talked about. Some of those fun ones. So, all right. There's 2. There's the last board. All right. All right. So here's some quick thoughts for those with kids in school. 26. All right. All right. When you're parenting the 2-child, it's important that differences between the children are reinforced. Okay. So an older child doesn't have the same bedtime. May have different kinds of activities. The oldest may be more responsible. Avoid comparison, saying, hey, why aren't you like your brother or your sister? Those remarks are only damaging to who they are. Don't feel compelled to do for one what you did for the other. Make sure you treat the child special. In the end, it'll even out. You may end up, for one child, you may end up needing to spend a little extra time to help them. You know, if you've got a boy who's a slow starter, you may need to spend a little extra time reading with them and helping them solve through. You may have a girl who you can afford to buy some really fancy pens because she is an artist and she's precise. And you can invest in some more expensive items for them that you would never consider for your son. Do things with one child at a time, which might mean that mom and dad, you both need to lean in. Take divide and conquer. Give both children plenty of one-on-one opportunities. In some cases, you might take one of the children on a business trip. The other one might be an early riser, so take them to breakfast. One might enjoy going for a bike ride, where the other's shopping. Gear those experiences to their needs and to their interests. Bear with me. I think I had another note here for someplace. All right. Let's talk about, let's look at some specific things and characteristics, interests and things like that. Firstborns and art. Firstborns may be drawn to impressive art. They tend to favor large size artwork, amazing colors, combination, new unexpected dimensions. Question for you guys, as married to a firstborn. If you were married to a firstborn, look at some of these things and think about those. Take your firstborn and consider what you might do with them. Stop and smell the roses, per se. Only childs tend to see things as they are, so they prefer realistic art that depict things which they can relate to. They enjoy art that shows beauty of scenery, happy people and animals. How about student achievement? Firstborns do well in order to impress others. They tend to do the best when they have instructors who give them praise for what they've done. In fact, they will tend to look for feedback by asking questions that they don't really need to have the answer for. They check in with the teacher to see if they are doing something right and that they are paying attention to how other students and other children do on projects. Not to copy them, but to surpass them. They like to work with groups where they can hear other people's ideas. In occupations, kind of interesting. Firstborns tend to like maybe a radio, I guess we now call it Sirius XM radio DJ, right? Only children, as an only child. An only can imagine the audience, relate to them comfortably, and entertain onlys organize often. Onlys can be organizers, often good as CEOs. They can be found in the ranks of our teachers. Researching fits firstborns as well. The research type thinking makes them comfortable for figuring things out. They have an interest in studying relationships because it is an area of weakness for them. Accounting, bookkeeping, editors, some things that take exact detail and able to pay attention to those details. Kind of fun. All right, here comes my first racy screen. How about sex and birth order? How does your birth order affect your marriage and behavior in the bedroom? Firstborns tend to be pretty predictable. Dr. Lehman says this skill makes you good at work at the same basic skills that will also work with you or against you in your marriage. Control mongering, perfectionists will erode the relationship rather than build it. All right, I'm moving on. Anybody get squirmy there? Hey, how about some firstborns in the Bible? We think about Moses. Moses is a firstborn, right? He was the firstborn male. He did have a sister, but he led God's people out of Egypt. Think about Joseph. Although Joseph was born sibling number 10 out of 12, he was the firstborn of Rachel. He became the head of Pharaoh's household, in charge of everything. And how about Timothy in the New Testament? He became the pastor of the church at Ephesus. Lots of great opportunities for seeing our firstborn kids in positions where that leadership, that characteristics are really going to come out. How about some things on middle children, talking about schools. Remember that second children and all of the middles tend to be competitive. The second born competes with the first for parental attention. When the second born discovers how to put crayons on paper, the firstborn displays a completed picture to mom. The second-born sense of inadequacy of what he or she is able or capable of creating. The second-born decides that that to get love, he must do something perfectly. So we want to be careful there. In perfection, the second-born chooses areas for perception. He's for perfection. Not going to be perfect in everything. One stands in front of the mirror for hours to get the facial expressions right, to get every hair in place and to get head tilted just perfect. Another must get class assignments done early, get every detail right, and make the assignment look perfect. Yet another must dress exactly so. So they're going to segment themselves on where they are. In orderliness and perfection, only child orderliness is often mistaken for perfection because of imperfections on this. Some of this actually is tearing back towards firstborns as well. So, how about occupations for that middle born? How about a fitness instructor? Firefighters, policemen, waiter or waitress. Nursing would be good, thinking about that, right? Jobs that involve working with people. Studies show middle children report being the most satisfied with whatever they are doing. Right. If you're interested, if you've got some other ones, there's some other research you can pick up online about the second-born personalities. That'd be kind of fun to look at. I've got a couple websites that I pulled some of my data from when I put this together. How about sex for those? How does your birth order affect you in the bedroom? Reminder that middles somewhat tend to be mysterious. They frequently have different time with feelings and often think of themselves as least special. Oops, sorry about that. If your middle child spouse is frustrated, they may not share that with you. Okay, I'm going to move on. How about middle children in the Bible? Let's think about Joseph again. Remember, he was the 10th child. He still had firstborn traits, head of the household. But remember what middle children are? They're manipulative, secretive. He tricked his older brothers into bringing their baby Benjamin to Egypt. Remember, they came in search of food. Joseph recognized who his brothers were and then learned that they had another brother and wouldn't do that. What about Jacob and Esau, right? Twins born. Jacob stole his birthright as the second born. He stole the birthright of his older brother. Ooh. Acts chapter 15, thinking about James, the son of Zebedee. He was the second son, but he led the council. He was the one that spoke up in the council in Acts chapter 15 in Jerusalem. When Paul comes and he's speaking about, well, do you need to be Jewish in order to be a believer, to be a Christian? In Acts, James is the one that speaks up boldly and says, no, it's faith in Christ and Christ alone. So lots of good hope for us as we are looking there. As we think about our final group, our lastborns, let's look at things for school. The babies tend to do well if allowed to express their creativity. They generate a lot of ideas, become motivated when they feel their ideas are respected, but under pressure when they tend to be rebels, not wanting to do what they are told. They do well on problem solving. They like to help other students, often associated with their poor achiever. If you're a fourth born, tend to be analytical. They tend to do well in social science and philosophy. They like to be challenged and tend to rise to the challenge. In the classroom, they tend to be either passive or aggressive, talking about either side of the coin here. Because of their analytical thinking, they do well when they are complimented in their thinking. All right, scrolling through another couple of quick notes here. Thank you for hanging on. This is art. All right. How about art? Well, a third born probably likes compassion in their art. They would relate to realistic art depicting human conditions that evoke sympathy, compassion, and understanding. A fourth born probably would like a darker side of art that represents the world with mysterious, threatening forces. Threatening forces may speak to the fourth experience of growing up in a world of older siblings who were threatening forces to them in their childhood. Thinking about younger ones and the art of being able to listen. Third-born children, as the baby, tend to listen for ideas. If the baby is a fourth child, they tend not even to listen. Of course, at times, everyone also listens to understand, to gain information, to relate to, and to learn. When you have a problem listening, check to see if you're listening according to your birth order personality instead of really listening to what somebody is saying. When another person does not seem to listen, that person's birth order may tell you what that person is really listening for. It's easier to deal with things when you know what is going on. Thinking about, most of you guys have read Covey's book, 7 Effective Habits of Successful People on Listening. He emphasizes listening techniques of active listening. Listening, repeat to affirm what you've heard, and then understand, and only then repeat. That helps people understand what they have. How about professions? Of course, for the baby of the family, selling is an excellent field for those. Although some third-borns would never consider it. Third-borns desire to help people. The third-born's desire to help people motivates them to sell so that they need a product they believe actually will help somebody. Give them such a product, the faith that they have are helping people, and let them go, and they'll do wonders in the selling world. This motivation of any salesperson needs, so trying to motivate salespeople with money tends to draw the wrong kind of people into selling. However, a top salesperson in a sales manager is often a mistake. So again, if you've got a really good third-born who's a great salesperson, if you put them into management, they may lack the leadership skills that our firstborn may require. The motivation of helping people makes good salespeople. A sales manager that makes numbers align, inventories match, make the whole thing work together. A baby doesn't bring those type of skills necessary to the table. Not all lastborns miss out on these skill sets, though. It's just not typical. That's why we want to look towards a firstborn for that. philosopher. Given their propensity to analyze endlessly, they can philosophize well. The best singers are often last and fourth borns. They seem to be so because of early experience in which people did not listen to them except when they were singing. When they insistently, they developed the ability to sing to compensate for not getting heard. Right, kind of clear. How about the baby and marriage? Lastborns tend to laugh a lot, even in bed. Because they were the babies in their family, lastborns are probably held and kissed more than other children and tend to be affectionate in nature. Think about your baby. They're the ones you want to be pulling in, having fun and laughing with. How about some lastborns in the Bible? David was the lastborn, last of 8 male sons. And yet David, think about the story of David and Goliath, who wanted to stand up for his God and upset about his brothers. And then afterwards, he paraded through Jerusalem after winning the war. New Testament. Oops, sorry about that. Went too far. Sorry about that. Let me get PowerPoint back up. John Mark. Let me do this. I'm going to stop sharing. John Mark in chapter 13 of Acts. He went out with Paul and Barnabas on the first missionary journey. But what happened? He gave up. He didn't have the tenacity to stay with it. So he returned. When Paul was ready to go on his second missionary journey, what did he say? I'm not taking that youth. I'm not taking that guy. He's not reliable. So Judas Iscariot was likely a lastborn. He was a rebel, a zealot. He broke away from everybody else. So a couple of those. So see if I've got this. John chapter 6, Judas remained with Jesus even when other less devoted followers began to leave the group. Because Judas asked the question, what's in it for me? Scripture tells us that Judas wanted to force Jesus' hand to take the rulership away from the strong hand of Rome and the kingdom. All right, there's some thoughts. What do you think? Come on back in.
Well, I can share. I realized that in my house, my mom lives with us and she's a firstborn. And then Felix is a firstborn. And then I'm a firstborn. And Emmanuel's a firstborn. So we have 4 people who want our ways all the time. So it's no wonder that we are always bickering about, different things. And so it became really obvious to me, like early on, that really explains kind of the dynamic in my house. And then the second thing is, it's really interesting that firstborns really don't want to be improved upon. And that's so true, because in my marriage, Felix would rather me just give him feedback. He's actually not really looking for any ideas. He just wants me to hear his idea and affirm it. So I do see that play out for him and for me. Like I don't necessarily need him to jump in and fix or rescue me. I just want him to know that like he's agreeing with me. And so same thing all across the board. So that was really interesting. And in terms of parenting, it is also a good tip to not try to improve upon someone who already feels the need to be perfect or like to do well. So, one of the things that I tell Emmanuel is just being a firstborn, I understand how he feels. And so sometimes I would tell him, I'm just like, I know you got a B, but what I really am interested in is that you tried your best and not really, it's not really always about the grade. And so Felix and I really try hard to not squash him or like his, wanting to do better. But then there are moments where I guess my question then comes up on what if he does need to improve on his cleanliness and like laziness? and other things. Like there's got to be room, even if he's a firstborn, where I could step in and help him, work on some of those things that like are not good human skills. So anyhow, just some thoughts, as I was listening. And obviously the secondborn, the babies, like all of those were helpful because I quickly identified the people around me who were in those categories and was able to kind of visualize, oh, maybe that's why. So it was all really interesting. Thanks, Kelly.
I appreciate you saying, yeah, you recognize as a middle child, oh, that's why I do what I do. Got it. So anybody else have some thoughts? Things they'd like to share?
I have a question. Do kids always fit into one category?
No.
Because
So-
I don't know if our firstborn really fits in. She does not fit the typical firstborn stereotype, but she also has some like disability, learning like disabilities, and part of that is like there's a lack of organization and things like that. So she has some of the characteristics, but like maybe half of them, and half of them she doesn't. And then our second, what? At all. Yeah, she's like opposite. And then our second born is a boy. So, and he's half middle child, half oldest child. So it's like and then we have another boy. So it's like, but in my family, like when I grew up, we have the very stereotypical firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn baby. And same with Pete. Well, Pete's family somewhat, but our kids like do not follow these molds. And so it's just interesting that, it doesn't fit every family necessarily, but it does fit them somewhat.
So remember, if you've got firstborn girl and a middle boy, your boy's going to still have some firstborn characteristics because he is the firstborn male.
Totally.
Okay. If you've got back, as Dr. Lehman, as we started with some framework, there are sometimes some learning disabilities that mean that you won't fulfill your position in role because of a disability. That doesn't mean that you don't fill everything. It just means that, okay, of the 12 things were listed, you've got them there on your sheet. Yeah, we can check 5 or 6 of them off, but several of these other ones, they're going to fall away. In some senses, you're going to have a role reversal that maybe your son will step in and take those responsibilities. In my age group, right? If the older sibling can't take the lead responsibility as the head of the family when mom and dad need to care, right? And they need to step up, then the middle child the next person down on the rung would step in to do those things. Why? Because they have the administrative gifts that the other one didn't have, or the emotion because of what have you. So if anybody knows my brother and I have an older brother, and he and I pair very well together. He's usually the guy that stands up in front of people and speaks, and I run the books. I'm the administrator, so it's kind of fun. And he oftentimes defers back to me. We work in business together as business partners, and kind of the same thing. I feed him all of the information, and then I step back and allow him to present, and then occasionally slip him a note that says, here's the details that you need to know. So not necessarily as a role reversal, but enough to I come alongside to complement. Not any different than what do we do as spouses, right? Somebody tends to take the lead.
Do you parent them as their position in the family, or as just like, because you're saying tips and tricks for like parenting a firstborn, parenting a middleborn, but if they're like a mix, then just do what you need to do.
You're going to need to apply both rules based on circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So you may find that for your middleborn son, when he's operating in a firstborn position role, that you'll want to be a little cautious about how perfection are you going to, you need to go in and correct it. Now, here's the other side. If he pulls a B, okay, and if he pulls a C and you know that, look, he really should be doing A work, then I'm going to criticize you. I know you can do better, and this is unacceptable.
Mhm.
So, last weekend with your kids. So when my girls were in junior high, we transitioned our parenting style from managing homework to managing grades. I no longer manage the homework. I didn't ask every night, well, what's your homework? What do you need to do and make sure that you got it done? We got to the point of saying, I know that math is not your strong skill, but you should be pulling a B in that class. A C is not going to be acceptable. Okay. But in history, you've got a great mind. You'll know you got history or social studies or something. Okay, that's an A class. I'm expecting you to get an A. I'm not going to manage the homework. I'll ask, hey, do you need any help with something? But I'm not going to ask, well, what's your homework tonight? Oh, I need this. I need, we're doing a drawing. And then I would lean in and say, what do you need? Do we need to go down to the store to Michael's and get some paper and some colored pencils? You need a poster board type of a thing. Manage the grades. But again, that's at a later point in life. Back to your question, you're going to have to manage how do you parent based on the role, the seat that they're sitting in. Likely your middle child always is a middle. Likely is your eldest as the oldest. Until you recognize that for that specific task, they really are operating as a middle child at a different role. Long answer to a short question, sorry, with some extra add in.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I have one other question. Do typical, like when people get married, are there typical birth orders that like tend to be more compatible?
No, not at all. Because again, what we do, as we heard with Joanna and Felix, again, you've got two firstborns that are complement each other very, very well in the way that they operate in their parenting, in their marriage, in their relationships, as they do with other folks. My wife is an only child, so she's a firstborn, but an only. Very strong leadership, but she allows me as her husband, as the mediator, the middle child, to still be the lead. Now there are times, which is really fun. So when both of my girls got married, as we were sitting, getting ready to go, my wife came over to me and nudged me and says, it's time. Looked at her, huh? It's time. We need to be praying for the wedding. It's your turn. You're on. Oh, okay. Time for me to step up into my role as the leader of the household. Even though, again, she's the firstborn, these are the things that these are characteristics. She has managed departments in her career and things. And but she's asked me, this is where I need you to step up as the leader, and then allowed me to take that role as a leader as she stepped back. So your question about marriage, it all works. We just need to know, as wives, you need your husbands so many times to lean in to take the leadership role in the household. We need you as our partners to remind us it's your turn to step up. You're on stage. Take the mic, pray for the family meal. I need you to lead our family. And I go, oh yeah, that's my role. Thank you for reminding me. Let me lean in and do that. So now, don't spring it on me the day of the wedding, halfway through, just before. It's a reminder that says, hey, I'm going to ask you to be doing this when we, at this event, be thinking about it. So when I remind you, I'm not catching you off guard and you're fumbling for some words. That's marriage advice for parenting.
Thanks.
Anybody else have some thoughts, comments, things that they found valuable?
Kelly, you mentioned something about not comparing kids, and such a great reminder. It almost comes, it's so easy for us to compare one against the other. as we're trying to raise them. We have to be very careful about that. It could create animosity between the two as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bobby.
I liked how you mentioned about only children and how they don't ever have any like competition at home or anyone to like share anything with. So that's always something that Eli and I are thinking about for Ezekiel. And just to get him to learn how to be giving, not just getting him anything he wants. And I like to say a lot of times I can't afford it, even though I can. I just keep telling him, sorry, I don't have the money for it, you know, and so that, you know, he just learns to like not have as much. But also you mentioned about fear, how they could be fearful. And we see that in Ezekiel too, because he is scared to do things like go to the top of the rocket ship, where you'll see kids that are maybe 2-3 years younger than him at the top of the rocket ship, you know? And so that's very interesting because I do see that in him.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Hannah. Thank you for sharing this time with us. A couple of thoughts. One is that I think first and foremost, like the birth order, I'm reminded that it's God who places us. It's not anyone's choice. I can see God's sovereign plan in that. So that's kind of reassuring for me to accept like myself as, you know, the firstborn, and then my husband is also the firstborn. And then I also have a 22-month-old. He's the only boy that we have. And so I kind of heard what, I don't know your first name, Mrs. Jennings, Eli's wife, and also Joanna, I know you have your one boy. And so that's something I'm thinking about, like, oh, does my baby need a sibling? But, you know, I'm realizing that it's not, we can think about it, but in the end, it's what God allows and does. And of course, I also have some of those concerns that you mentioned, Mrs. Jennings, about, you know, being a cautious, fearful kid, which I can already see in my baby boy. He's very shy. And I think the coronavirus doesn't help with that fact because he has no friends. He hasn't really seen anybody. And then also, I also kind of empathize with and the Fowlers about, you know, maybe the kids not kind of fitting the mold of, you know, the firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn. And I think that's what's unique about each of us. Maybe there's a facet of each birth order that we can identify in our children or in ourselves, but maybe it's not, maybe we don't fit it like to the T. And I wonder if we can just draw from some of the other kind of birth orders and see, okay, if this child exhibits more of these characteristics, how can we help them along? And then also, like, if we see kind of the pitfalls of a certain birth order, like, for example, if my baby's going to end up growing up as like an only child, like, how can I help him grow up to be more generous or to be more inclusive or to share and all of that stuff? So that's something I'm thinking personally as I, you know, I just got started on this parenting journey. So
Great comments. Great comments. Thanks for sharing. You're going to do great as a mom. Just know you're going to do great. So, and again,
Thank
that
you.
list is not exhaustive and it's
Right.
not comprehensive. So, you know, don't say that, hey, I've only got 7 of the 10 or 11 items done. What's happening? I've got a defective child. No, that it was a large bucket for which we're drawing characteristics out. All of us would identify with 4 or 5 or 6 of them. There's still a few that says, nope, that's not really me. But I can see that in other middle-born childs who don't have the same thing, as God has made each one of us unique. Knit us in the womb, as David wrote in the Psalms.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right. We're at the top of the hour. Anybody else have anything else to share? If not, I think we'll get, Joanna may have something else for us before we wrap up this morning. So I don't know if anybody else has any last thoughts. contributions?
Just want to thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me in your home this morning. And Joanna and I've talked about a couple other things that we might see if we can lace back in as the year continues. And maybe we'll do one of these sitting in the big fellowship hall at church as we get back, as we all get back together and able to meet in person.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.